Most copper rank adventurers did not die fighting dragons. They did not die beneath the claws of ancient monsters. They did not die in battles that bards would sing about. Most of them died in forgotten places, flooded basements, collapsed wells, muddy roads, doing jobs no one remembered. The cellar beneath Harlan's bakery smelled of mold, damp stone, spoiled grain, and rat droppings. 5 giant rats lay motionless across the floor. Tarin Vale stood in the middle of the room with his sword hanging loosely at his side. He wasn't admiring his work. He was making sure it was finished. Copper rank adventurers learned quickly. The first thing that tried to kill you wasn't always the last. He waited, listened, nothing. Only then did he exhale. The job was finally over. He crossed the cellar, stopping beside a gap in the crumbling wall. A nest of shredded cloth and straw sat hidden behind it. Empty. Good. He drove his sword into it anyway, scattering the remains across the floor. No eggs, no newborns. Nothing left that would have the baker calling the guild again next month. Satisfied, he cleaned his blade and slid it back into its sheath. The trapdoor overhead creaked open. "Hoy!" Harlan called down. "You still breathing?" "For now." The old baker climbed halfway down the stairs carrying a lantern. Its light swept across the ruined cellar. Broken grain sacks, a collapsed shelf, dead rats. He let out a long whistle. That's more than last time. They found a place to nest. They always do. Harlan stepped onto the cellar floor, nudging one of the larger rats with the toe of his boot. Ugly little things. They get uglier the bigger they are. The baker laughed. "You're talking more these days." "So I've been told." Harlan looked at him for a moment before giving a satisfied nod. "Good. You used to come out of this cellar looking like you'd seen a ghost." Tarin glanced around. "I've seen worse." The words slipped out before he realized what he'd said. Harlan's smile faded, for only a moment. Then it returned. "I suppose you have." They climbed back into the bakery together. Warm bread filled the air. Customers waited near the front counter while Harlan's wife hurried fresh loaves from the oven. Life had already moved on, as if giant rats beneath the floor were simply another inconvenience. Outside, Harlan counted several copper coins into Tarin's hand, then handed him 2 fresh loaves of bread. He paused, studied the young adventurer for a second, then quietly added a third. "I only earned 2. You've gotten thinner." "I've been busy." "Busy isn't a meal. It pays for one. Then eat 2. Tarin looked at the extra loaf. "Thank you." Harlan shrugged. "You keep my bakery standing. I can spare a loaf." Tarin tucked the bread beneath his arm. "I'll see you next month." The baker groaned dramatically. "I was hoping never to see you again." "You probably won't." "A beat, until the rats come back." Harlan pointed at him. "That one was a joke." "Maybe." The old baker laughed as Tarin walked away. The streets were alive with the afternoon rush. Merchants shouted from colorful stalls. Children chased one another through the square with wooden swords in their hands. A blacksmith hammered glowing steel while an apprentice worked the bellows. The smell of roasted meat drifted from a nearby tavern. Nobody paid Tarin any attention. Copper rank adventurers rarely drew a crowd. They weren't heroes. They were simply the people willing to take the jobs everyone else avoided. Sometimes they returned, sometimes they didn't. The Wayfarers Guild stood near the center of the city. Its heavy oak doors stood open despite the chill outside. Warm light spilled onto the street. Inside, the guild buzzed with activity. An Iron Rank party argued over how a bridge had collapsed beneath them. Near the fireplace, a Bronze Rank ranger patiently removed burrs from his cloak while pretending not to listen. 2 copper adventurers loudly debated which of them had actually killed a wolf first. Near the request board, 3 merchants tried to outbid one another for an escort before nightfall. No one looked at Tarin, just another copper returning from another forgettable job, exactly where he belonged. He crossed the hall and stopped at Mira's counter. She was busy updating the guild ledger. Without looking up, she asked, "Giant rats again?" They were hungry. They usually are. She accepted the completed request and began reading through it. "You cleared the nest?" "I did." "No bites?" "Not this time." "Good." She stamped the request, set it aside, and opened the large leather-bound ledger resting beside her. Her finger slowly traced down one page, then another. She stopped, looked back at Tarin. A faint smile crossed her face. "Well?" She closed the ledger. "You've completed enough copper requests." Tarin frowned. I have?" Mira nodded. "You've earned your iron trial." Tarin didn't answer immediately. The words hung in the air. Iron trial. He had imagined hearing them for months. Now that they had finally come, he wished they hadn't. His hand drifted beneath his cloak almost without thinking. His fingers closed around a small metal badge hidden inside a leather pouch. Copper rank. Not his. Bram Holtz. Mira noticed where Tarin's hand had gone. Her voice softened. Tarin. He looked away. Can I decline? No. The answer came so quickly it almost sounded rehearsed. His jaw tightened. I don't think I'm ready. No one ever thinks they are. Then why force it? Mira folded her hands atop the counter. Because staying copper forever isn't an option. Around them, the guild continued as though nothing important was happening. Someone won a hand of cards. A serving girl laughed after narrowly. Avoiding a collision with a passing adventurer, a merchant complained that guild prices had gone up again. Life went on. Only Tarin's world had stopped. Mira continued. Copper adventurers prove they can survive. She tapped the guild ledger. Iron adventurers prove others can survive with them. Tarin stared silently at the worn wooden countertop. I never asked for that. No. A faint smile crossed Mira's face. The ones worth trusting rarely do. Silence settled between them. Finally, Mira reached beneath the counter and withdrew a sealed request. Dark green wax held it closed. The guild crest had been pressed firmly into the seal. She placed it gently in front of him. 3 merchant caravans have disappeared near Cliffside Pass. Tarin frowned. Bandits? The merchants think so. And you? I think bandits leave bodies. She slid the parchment closer. Or ransom demands. Another push. Or frightened survivors. Her expression grew serious. This, she rested a finger atop the request. Left nothing. Tarin looked at the seal but didn't reach for it. How many? 3 caravans. How many people? We don't know. His eyes lifted. You don't know? They never arrived. The weight of the assignment settled over the counter. This will be your iron trial. Tarin let out a slow breath. So, if I fail? Mira met his eyes. Then you come home. He blinked. That's it? I'd rather have a living copper than a dead hero. For the first time since entering the guild, the tension in Tarin's shoulders eased, only slightly. Mira looked past him. Garrick. A chair scraped against the wooden floor. Tarin turned. Near the fireplace, an older adventurer stood from his seat. He hadn't been making speeches. He hadn't been telling exaggerated stories until Mira called his name. Tarin hadn't noticed him at all. He was broad-shouldered beneath a faded traveling cloak. His beard had gone gray years ago. His nose had clearly been broken more than once. A long scar disappeared beneath the collar of his tunic. 2 fingers were missing from his left hand. A battered round shield rested against his chair. Beside it leaned a spear polished from decades of use. Neither weapon was impressive. Neither needed to be. The old adventurer walked toward the counter at an easy pace. Several guild members greeted him as he passed. He greeted every one of them by name. This him? He asked. Mira nodded. Tarin Vale. Garrick looked him over from head to toe. Smaller than I expected. Tarin raised an eyebrow. I get that a lot. The old man chuckled. Good. Smaller targets are harder to hit. Tarin couldn't tell whether he was joking. Mira ignored them both. Garrick Stone. Iron rank. He'll be overseeing your trial. Tarin's eyes drifted toward the weathered badge pinned to Garrick's cloak. Iron. Nothing more. No bronze. No silver. Just iron. After all these years, Garrick caught him looking. Go on. Tarin looked away. What? Ask. I don't have a question. You do. You want to know why I'm still iron? Tarin hesitated. Maybe. The old adventurer smiled. I'll tell you. He lifted his shield from the floor. On the road. Then, before Tarin could ask another question, the guild doors opened. A cool breeze swept through the hall. Someone had arrived. The guild doors swung open. Cold afternoon air swept through the hall. A young woman stepped inside carrying a crooked wooden staff over one shoulder. A worn leather satchel bounced gently against her hip with every step. Bundles of dried herbs hung beside small glass bottles. Several feathers were tied to her belt with bits of twine. Most adventurers decorated themselves with monster trophies. Maeve Ashwood decorated herself with research. She stopped just inside the doorway. Knelt. Picked something off the floor. Interesting. Tarin watched as she held up a small gray feather. One of the guild pigeons had apparently wandered inside again. Maeve turned it over thoughtfully before slipping it into a notebook tucked beneath her arm. Then, as though nothing unusual had happened, she walked toward Mira's counter. You said there was coin. Mira pinched the bridge of her nose. I said there was a guild assignment. Those usually become coin. Eventually. Maeve smiled. Exactly. Only then did she notice Tarin and Garrick standing nearby. Oh. She looked Tarin up and down, his worn cloak, the fresh tear near his shoulder, the flower still clinging to his boots. You smell like mold. I've been in a cellar. I know. She nodded matter-of-factly. You also smell like dead rats. Tarin blinked. Ah, that's oddly specific. It isn't. She pointed toward his boots. Rat blood. Then toward his sleeve. Rat hair. Then toward the flower dust still clinging to his trousers. And flour. She shrugged. Baker's cellar. Garrick let out a loud laugh. I like her already. Maeve ignored him. I'm Maeve. Tarin. I know. She smiled. Mira talks about you. Tarin looked toward the guild clerk. You do? Only when paperwork gives me a headache. Maeve nodded. So, fairly often. Even Tarin almost smiled. Almost. Mira reached beneath the counter and retrieved another guild badge. Copper. She placed it beside Tarin's request. Maeve Ashwood. Copper rank. Also eligible for an iron trial. Maeve's eyebrows lifted. Oh. Today? You've been putting it off for 3 weeks. I've been busy. You were studying mushrooms. They were fascinating mushrooms. They were mushrooms. Maeve considered that. Fair. Garrick folded his arms. So, I get 2 trainees. You get 2 future iron ranks, Mira corrected. We'll see. Mira slid the sealed request between Tarin and Maeve. Neither reached for it immediately. 3 caravans have disappeared near Cliffside Pass. Maeve's playful expression faded. Missing? Mira nodded. No survivors. No bodies. No witnesses. Maeve frowned. That's strange. Tarin looked at her. You already have an idea? Not an idea. A question. She reached over and tapped the parchment. If this was bandits. She looked at Mira. Why leave the wagons? They didn't. They're missing too? One was found this morning. Maeve tilted her head. What condition? Battered. Broken. But mostly intact. She nodded slowly. Interesting. You know something? Garrick asked. No. Maeve shook her head. But I know what doesn't make sense. She began counting on her fingers. Bandits want money. They take cargo. They don't abandon it. She raised another finger. Wolves eat. They leave bodies. Another finger. Goblins steal. They also leave bodies. One more. People disappear. Monsters usually don't. Silence settled over the counter. Even Garrick's expression became more thoughtful. Maeve finally looked back at Mira. So, what are we actually hunting? Mira answered honestly. We don't know. Garrick picked up the sealed request. Then we'll find out. He tucked the parchment inside his cloak before looking between the 2 copper adventurers. We leave in an hour. Maeve blinked. I need supplies. You've had 3 weeks. I didn't know I'd actually be going. Garrick laughed. Tarin, meet us at the west gate. Then he looked at Maeve, and try not to buy the entire apothecary. I make no promises. Without another word, Maeve disappeared back out into the city. Garrick watched her leave. She actually means that. Tarin frowned. What exactly did I just agree to? The old adventurer picked up his shield. A very interesting trip. He slung the battered shield across his back, then smiled. And if we're lucky, only one of you will drive me crazy before we get there. The western gate stood open beneath the afternoon sun. Farmers guided wagons into the city while merchants hurried out before nightfall. Just beyond the walls, the stone road stretched toward distant hills. Before disappearing between the mountains, Garrick was already waiting. His shield rested against a milestone while he finished the last of an apple. He spotted Tarin first. You're early. I don't like keeping people waiting. Good habit. A few moments later, Maeve appeared at a brisk walk, her satchel looking noticeably fuller than before. Garrick eyed it suspiciously. How much did you buy? I exercised remarkable restraint. You say that every time. Maeve opened the satchel just enough for him to peek inside. Bundles of herbs, small bottles, several folded maps, a length of rope, 2 journals, and somehow, a skull. Garrick stared. Is that new? Maeve looked down. Oh, I forgot that was in there. You forgot you were carrying a skull? It isn't a human skull. As though that makes it better. She held it up proudly. Fox. I found it outside the city. Tarin looked at Garrick. Does she always collect bones? No. Garrick sighed. Sometimes it's feathers. Maeve smiled. They're useful. For what? I'm not entirely sure yet. Garrick chuckled. I've stopped asking. The city slowly disappeared behind them. Stone walls became farmland. Farmland gave way to rolling hills. By late afternoon, the sounds of the city had vanished completely. Only the wind remained. For a long while, no one spoke. Maeve eventually broke the silence. So, Tarin sighed. What? I've been told you're the quiet one. I've been told you're the loud one. She smiled. I like you already. I don't think that's true. It isn't. Garrick laughed loud enough to startle a flock of birds from a nearby tree. The old adventurer walked with the easy confidence of someone who had traveled these roads hundreds of times. His pace never changed, never hurried, never slowed. Every now and then he would point something out, a broken wagon wheel lying beside the road. Remember where that is? Tarin frowned. Why? If you ever have to run, you'll know exactly where not to trip. An abandoned hunter's blind overlooking a meadow. Someone built that for a reason. Maeve climbed halfway inside before Garrick could stop her. Nothing's lived here for years. How do you know? No droppings. No nests. No scent. She climbed back down. The wood's too dry. Tarin blinked. You can tell all that just by looking? I wasn't looking. She smiled. I was observing. As the afternoon wore on, Tarin found himself watching Maeve almost as often as the road. Every few hundred steps she stopped, not because she was tired, because she had found something, an unusual mushroom growing beneath an old log, a line of tiny tracks crossing the mud, a bird's nest tucked high into an oak tree. She wrote everything down, page after page. Eventually, Tarin asked the question that had been bothering him for the last hour. Hey, why? Maeve looked up from her notebook. Why what? Why write all that down? She looked genuinely confused, so I don't forget. I've never seen anyone keep notes on mushrooms. I have. She closed the notebook. Monsters don't appear from nowhere. They live somewhere. They hunt. They migrate. They compete. They raise young. They die. They're part of the world. She glanced toward the distant mountains. The more we understand them, the fewer adventurers have to die learning the same lessons. For the first time since leaving the city, Tarin didn't have a reply. Garrick noticed. He smiled to himself but said nothing. The road stretched onward, and somewhere beyond the distant hills, Cliffside Pass waited. The sun had begun its slow descent by the time Garrick finally raised a hand. We'll stop here. Tarin looked around. There was nothing, just a small clearing beside the road. A narrow stream trickled over smooth stones nearby, and a ring of old blackened rocks marked where countless travelers had built campfires before them. Maeve smiled. This is a good campsite. Tarin looked around again. How can you tell? She pointed toward the trees. See those branches? He frowned. They're broken. Not broken. Trimmed. She walked to the edge of the clearing. Someone camps here regularly. She knelt beside the fire ring. The ashes are old. She sifted them through her fingers, but not ancient. Garrick set his shield against a log. Travelers use this place every few weeks. Maeve nodded. The stream keeps animals nearby, but not too close, and the trees block most of the wind. Tarin blinked. You noticed all that already? Maeve looked genuinely surprised. Didn't you? He glanced around once more. No. She grinned. You will. Camp came together quickly. Tarin gathered firewood. Maeve fetched water from the stream. Garrick somehow produced a small cooking pot from his pack that looked almost as old as he was. I've had this longer than either of you have been alive. Maeve looked inside it. And when was the last time you cleaned this? It builds character. It builds diseases. It builds flavor. She stared at him. I'm not eating flavor. Garrick laughed. You'll survive. I sincerely hope so. As darkness settled across the hills, the fire crackled gently between them. The world became quieter. Crickets sang. An owl called somewhere in the distance. The road, busy only hours before, now sat empty beneath the fading light. Garrick stirred a simple stew of dried meat, onions, and wild herbs. Maeve watched him suspiciously. What? You let me gather the herbs. I did. You didn't check if they were edible. I've watched you sniff every plant we've walked past for 6 hours. You noticed? I notice everything. Maeve smiled. I like him. Tarin looked up. You've said that twice. I've lied both times. Garrick nearly dropped the spoon, laughing. After they had eaten, Garrick leaned back against a fallen log. So, he looked at Tarin. Why'd you become an adventurer? The question lingered in the air. Finally, my father. What about him? He was a town guard. Garrick nodded. And? He taught me to use a sword. He wanted you to join the guard? Tarin stared into the fire. He wanted me to survive. Silence followed. No one interrupted it. After a while, Garrick spoke again. Good man. He was. Maeve quietly poked at the fire with a stick. My parents wanted me to become a healer. Tarin looked over. What happened? I discovered monsters. She smiled faintly. They're much more interesting. Garrick snorted. That's one way to disappoint your parents. They've mostly accepted it. Mostly. My mother still introduces me as... Maeve sighed dramatically. Our daughter who plays with dead things. Even Tarin smiled at that. Just a little. The fire burned lower. Garrick reached into his pack and removed a worn leather map. He spread it across the ground. This, he tapped the narrow mountain road, is Cliffside Pass. His finger traced the winding trail. Steep cliffs. Narrow road. Bad visibility. If someone wants to disappear, he looked at both of them. This is where they'd choose. Maeve leaned closer. The caravans vanished here? Within a few miles. She frowned thoughtfully. If it isn't bandits, it probably isn't. What makes you so sure? Garrick smiled. Because merchants always blame bandits first. They're usually wrong. Maeve nodded slowly. I still don't like the missing wagon. Neither do I. Tarin studied the map. If something is hunting there, it has a reason. Garrick looked at him. What kind of reason? Tarin hesitated, then answered carefully. Food. Maeve smiled. Maybe. But predators don't usually leave wagons. No, they don't. The three of them sat in silence. The fire popped softly. Somewhere far off in the darkness, a strange bird cried. Maeve looked toward the sound. Did you hear that? Garrick nodded. Hawk. She listened another moment. No. A faint smile crossed her face. Not a hawk. A mountain kite. They nest in the cliffs this time of year. Tarin looked at her. You can tell just from the call? She nodded. They're beautiful. A pause. And very territorial. Garrick chuckled. I have a feeling you're going to identify every creature we meet. Maeve smiled into the fire. I certainly hope so. Above them, the stars slowly filled the night sky. Tomorrow, they would reach Cliffside Pass. Morning came quietly. A thin layer of mist clung to the hills as the three adventurers packed their camp. Maeve was already awake. Not because she was eager to leave, because she had wandered nearly 100 paces from camp, examining a patch of flowers. Garrick didn't even look up. Don't eat them. I'm not going to eat them. You said that yesterday. I was right yesterday. You were violently right. Maeve rolled her eyes. It was one mushroom. It was one very educational mushroom. Tarin blinked. You poisoned yourself? It was for science. It was an accident. It became science. Garrick laughed. I've been traveling with her 3 months. I'm still not sure which answer is true. Maeve smiled proudly. Neither am I. They were back on the road before sunrise. The hills gradually gave way to rougher terrain. The road narrowed. Large boulders replaced open fields. Trees became fewer. The mountains loomed larger with every passing mile. Tarin noticed something. The birds had grown quiet. He looked toward the cliffs. Where did everything go? Garrick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, What do you hear? Tarin listened. The wind. Loose stones shifting. Their own footsteps. Not much. Exactly. Maeve looked toward the cliffs. Something hunts here. Tarin looked at her. You know that already? She nodded. Small animals don't simply disappear. They stop making noise. She crouched beside the road. Look, a set of hoof prints crossed the dirt, before abruptly turning back the way they had come. Deer, they came this far. She pointed farther ahead, then changed their minds. Why? They smelled something. Garrick smiled. Good. Maeve looked up. I wasn't trying to impress you. I know. You did anyway. The cliff slowly closed around the road. What had once been open countryside became a narrow stone corridor. Towering walls rose on either side. Some reached hundreds of feet into the sky. The wind behaved strangely here. It rushed overhead one moment, then vanished entirely the next. Maeve frowned. Listen. Tarin stopped walking. I don't hear anything. Exactly. She pointed upward. The cliffs catch sound. She tossed a pebble toward the rock wall. The tiny click echoed several times before fading. If something called from above, she glanced around. You might think it came from behind you. Garrick nodded approvingly. Remember that. You'll need it. Around midday, they found the wagon. One wheel had shattered against the rocks. Crates lay scattered across the road. Bolts of cloth fluttered gently in the breeze. A sack of grain had burst open. Seeds covered the ground. Tarin slowly drew his sword. No bodies. Garrick rested a hand on the broken wagon. No blood either. Maeve walked a slow circle around the wreck. She didn't touch anything. She simply observed. After a long moment, she stopped beside one of the wagon wheels. That's odd. Tarin walked over. What? She pointed toward deep grooves carved into the wood. These aren't axe marks. No. They're too narrow. She knelt, running a finger beside one of the cuts. Talons. Garrick's expression hardened. You sure? She nodded. Very. She continued circling the wagon, then stopped again. There. She carefully lifted something caught between two broken boards. A feather, nearly as long as her forearm, white, with streaks of pale gray running through its center. She turned it slowly in the sunlight. I've never seen one this large. Tarin frowned. What is it? She hesitated. Don't know. That answer surprised even her. Garrick took the feather, studied it, then handed it back. If you don't know, I definitely don't. Maeve looked toward the towering cliffs above them. It wasn't bandits. No. Garrick quietly agreed. It wasn't. A cold breeze drifted through the pass. It carried with it a song. Soft, beautiful, almost gentle. Tarin slowly looked up. Did you hear that? Another voice joined the first. Then another. The melody drifted between the cliffs, echoing from wall to wall until it became impossible to tell where it truly came from. Maeve's curiosity disappeared instantly. Her grip tightened around her staff. Garrick. I know. The old adventurer quietly lifted his shield from his back. He didn't rush, didn't panic. He simply settled into a stance that looked practiced through decades of experience. The singing stopped. Silence. Then, a shadow swept across the road. Tarin instinctively looked down. Garrick's voice exploded across the pass. Don't watch the sky. Too late. Something screamed overhead. A blur of feathers dropped toward them, claws extended, eyes locked onto Tarin. The first harpy had begun its dive. The harpy hit the road like a falling spear. Tarin threw himself sideways. Talons tore through the air where his head had been only a heartbeat earlier. Stone exploded beneath the creature's claws. Before he could recover, another scream echoed overhead. Shield side! Garrick barked. Tarin reacted instantly. He rolled toward the veteran just as a second harpy swept across the road. Its claws scraped against Garrick's shield, leaving 4 deep grooves in the wood. The impact echoed through the pass. Maeve raised her staff. 3 pale bolts of shimmering light shot into the sky. The first missed. The second struck a harpy squarely in the chest. The third clipped a wing. The creature shrieked, spiraling toward the cliffs before catching the wind again. They're fast, Maeve shouted. They're cautious, Garrick corrected. Watch! The flock didn't commit. Instead, they circled overhead, watching, waiting. Every dive ended just before they reached spear range. Then they climbed again. They're testing us, Tarin muttered. Garrick smiled. Now you're thinking. The singing returned, softer now, almost playful. It drifted between the cliffs until Tarin couldn't tell which direction it came from. One voice became 3. 3 became 5. The mountains themselves seemed to sing. Maeve covered one ear. They're using the echoes. What? The cliffs. She pointed upward without taking her eyes off the sky. You'll hear them from the wrong direction. Almost immediately, a scream erupted behind Tarin. He spun. Nothing. Above. Garrick roared. Tarin looked up just in time. A harpy folded its wings and dropped like an arrow. He raised his sword, steel-mid talons. The impact numbed his arms. The creature twisted away before he could counterattack. They never stay still, he growled. They don't have to, Garrick answered. They own the sky. Maeve crouched beside the broken wagon. She wasn't hiding. She was watching, following the harpies with careful eyes. They aren't hunting. Tarin glanced toward her. What? They've had chances. She pointed toward the flock. If they wanted us dead, they'd all attack together. Another harpy screamed overhead. Maeve ignored it. They're trying to drive us away. Garrick nodded. Why? Maeve slowly looked toward the cliffs. Because they're protecting something. Silence. Then, a distant scream. Not a harpy. Human. It echoed faintly from somewhere high above. Tarin turned instantly. Someone's alive. The scream came again. Short,
Weak.
then disappeared. Without another word, Tarin ran toward the base of the cliffs. Stop. Garrick's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Tarin froze. What? The veteran pointed toward the ground. Look. Only now did Tarin notice the trail. Loose stones, fresh footprints, broken branches. Something had been dragged uphill. Maeve knelt beside the tracks. Several people. She brushed away loose gravel. Heavy loads. She looked farther up the winding path, and she frowned. They climbed willingly. How do you know? No heel marks. No signs of struggling. She looked back toward the wagon. They were carried after they surrendered. Garrick nodded slowly. Good eyes. Maeve stood. They're nesting. Tarin frowned. Nesting? She looked toward the cliffs. Birds carry food. They don't eat it where they catch it. The realization settled over all three of them. The prisoners were somewhere above. The singing began again. Closer. Much closer. The flock landed across the cliff face, watching, waiting, not attacking, almost as if they wanted the adventurers to leave. Garrick rested his spear across one shoulder. Well? Tarin looked at him. Well, what? What do we do? Tarin blinked. You're asking me? This is your trial. You're the Iron Rank, and you're the one earning the badge. Tarin looked back toward the winding trail, then toward the circling harpies, then toward the abandoned wagon. His fingers tightened around the grip of his sword. His mind raced. Bram, the cave, the goblins, the panic, the mistake. He closed his eyes, only for a second. When he opened them, the fear was still there, but it no longer decided for him. He looked toward Garrick. We climb. The old adventurer smiled. Good. Maeve adjusted her satchel. I was hoping you'd say that. Together, the three adventurers left the road behind and started up the narrow trail toward the cliffs. High above them, the singing stopped, as if whatever waited at the top already knew they were coming. The climb was steeper than it had looked from below. Loose stones shifted beneath every step. Thorn bushes clung stubbornly to the cliffside, forcing the three adventurers to weave between jagged rocks and narrow ledges. No one spoke. The wind carried every sound away before it could travel far. Halfway up the trail, Garrick suddenly stopped. He crouched beside the path. What do you see? Tarin looked around. Rocks. Garrick waited. Maeve stepped closer. More than rocks. She pointed toward several pale marks scattered across the stone. White stains. Tarin frowned. Bird droppings? Maeve smiled. Good. She knelt beside them. Fresh. She looked toward the cliffs overhead. We're getting close. Garrick nodded. What else? Tarin scanned the path again. Broken branches, loose feathers, deep scratches carved into the stone. His eyes stopped. It's blood. Only a few drops, almost hidden among the gravel. Maeve followed his gaze. Human. You can tell. It isn't dry enough to be old. She looked farther up the trail. They've been feeding recently. Neither of the others liked the way she said it. The trail narrowed until only one person could walk at a time. A sheer drop disappeared to their left. Towering stone rose to their right. The wind howled between them. Garrick quietly moved to the front. From here on, he lowered his voice, and we don't know what's waiting. Tarin nodded. Maeve tightened her grip on her staff. The three continued upward, step by careful step. A faint sound drifted through the wind. Not singing, crying. Tarin stopped. Did you hear that? This time all three of them did. A child, somewhere above. The crying stopped almost immediately, as though someone had covered their mouth. Tarin's pace quickened. Garrick caught his shoulder. Slow. They're alive. So are we. Tarin clenched his jaw. Garrick quietly continued. If we rush, none of us leave. Reluctantly, Tarin slowed. The trail finally opened onto a wide shelf carved naturally into the mountainside. Everyone froze. Wooden cages hung from thick beams driven into cracks in the cliff. Some dangled over empty air. Others rested against the rock face. Inside, people. A merchant, an elderly woman, 2 guards, a young boy, a little girl no older than 8. The prisoners spotted them almost immediately. The older merchant gripped the bars. Please. His desperate whisper echoed across the ledge. Help us. The little girl began crying again. We thought nobody was coming. Tarin instinctively stepped forward. Garrick's arm stopped him. Count. Tarin frowned. What? Count. He forced himself to breathe. The cages. 6 prisoners. 3 cages. 1 narrow ledge. No harpies. Too quiet. Maeve slowly turned in a circle. They know we're here. How? She pointed toward the cliff above them. Fresh claw marks scored the stone. Broken feathers littered the rocks. They're watching. Tarin looked up. Saw nothing. That somehow made it worse. Garrick folded his arms. So, Tarin already knew what was coming. Don't. What do we do? Tarin didn't answer. You know the answer? No. I don't. You do. This isn't the time. Garrick shook his head. No. It's exactly the time. The words hit harder than any blow, because this wasn't about harpies. It was about Bram, about a cave, about another rescue, about another decision. Another child cried from inside the cages. Tarin looked over. The little girl stared directly at him. Mister, please. His stomach tightened. Maeve quietly stepped beside him. If we wait, she glanced toward the sky. They'll come back first. Silence. The wind whistled between the cliffs. Tarin closed his eyes, only for a heartbeat. Then he opened them again. Maeve. She blinked. Yes? Your illusion spell. She nodded. I can make light. I can make sound. For a little while.
Can you make both?
She thought for a moment. Yes, but not for long. Tarin nodded, then looked toward Garrick. Can you hold this path? The old adventurer smiled. I've been holding worse places for 30 years. Good. Tarin turned toward the cages. I'll free the prisoners. Maeve looked pleasantly surprised. That's actually a plan. Tarin ignored her. You make them look the wrong way. She smiled. I can do that. Garrick. The veteran rested his shield on his arm. Keep anything from getting past you. His smile widened. Now you're starting to sound like an iron rank. Before Tarin could answer, a shadow passed over the cliff. Then another. Then another. The singing returned, closer than ever before. One voice, then three, then a dozen. The prisoners looked up in terror. Maeve slowly raised her staff. Garrick planted his shield firmly in the center of the trail. Tarin drew his sword. High above them, the harpies finally revealed themselves. One by one, they stepped onto the edge of the cliffs, watching, waiting, smiling, and then the first one spread its wings. The first harpy leapt. Maeve slammed the end of her staff against the stone. A burst of pale light exploded high above the cliff. The air cracked like thunder. Half the flock twisted toward the illusion. The rest dove. Garrick! Tarin shouted. The path. The veteran didn't hesitate. His shield crashed into the first harpy before it reached the prisoners. Wood splintered. Talons screeched across iron. The narrow trail became a wall of steel. Maeve lifted her staff again. 3 glowing bolts streaked into the sky. One struck a harpy squarely in the shoulder. Another missed. The third burst against the cliff face, showering the pass with brilliant sparks. The flock screamed. Just enough. Tarin! Maeve yelled. They're distracted. Tarin was already moving. He sprinted past Garrick, ignoring the battle, ignoring the screaming. Straight for the cages. The first lock shattered beneath his sword. Can you walk? The merchant nodded frantically. Then get the others. He cut the second cage free. The elderly woman stumbled forward. The young guard caught her before she fell. Keep moving. Another harpy folded its wings. It dove directly toward the little girl. She froze. For just a heartbeat, so did Tarin. Another cave, another child, another friend who had trusted him. Bram. His heart pounded. Fear threatened to root him to the stone. Then Garrick's voice thundered behind him. Lead! Not run, not fight. Lead. Tarin moved. He threw himself between the child and the diving harpy. Talons ripped across his shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm. But the girl remained untouched. The harpy shrieked. Before it could pull away, Tarin drove his sword upward. The blade pierced beneath its ribs. The creature screamed once, then crashed lifelessly against the cliff. The remaining flock erupted into furious cries. They're committing! Maeve shouted.
No more holding back.
Garrick grinned. About time. A second harpy slammed into his shield. He shoved it over the edge of the cliff. It disappeared into the valley below. Maeve's staff glowed again. Dark vines burst from cracks in the stone, wrapping around another harpy's legs. It crashed hard enough to shake the ledge. Tarin! The prisoners! He looked back. Everyone was free. One merchant carried the little girl. Another supported the elderly woman. Good. Garrick! The veteran glanced over. Fall back. Without question, Garrick obeyed. His shield never left the enemy. Step by steady step, he gave ground, protecting the civilians, exactly as Tarin had ordered. Maeve retreated beside them. firing shimmering bolts whenever a harpy came too close. The flock hesitated. Their prey was escaping. One final harpy screamed and dove. Tarin met it head-on. Steel flashed. Feathers scattered across the wind. The creature collapsed only a few paces from the edge. Silence. The remaining harpies circled once, twice, then climbed into the clouds. Their haunting song faded with them. No one moved, not until the little girl slowly walked toward Tarin. She looked at the blood running down his arm, then quietly wrapped both arms around his waist. "Thank you." Tarin stood perfectly still, awkwardly. He rested a hand on her head. Maeve smiled. "I knew there was a person under all that brooding." "I wasn't brooding. You absolutely were." Even Tarin couldn't argue. The journey back felt shorter, perhaps because no one walked alone. The rescued merchants filled the road with quiet conversation. The little girl insisted on walking beside Tarin. Every few minutes she reached for his hand without saying a word. He never pulled away. By the time the city walls came into view, the sun was beginning to set. The guild doors swung open. Conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the exhausted group. Mira stepped around the counter. "You found them." Tarin nodded. "They're alive." A smile spread across her face, one shared by nearly everyone in the hall. Garrick walked to the counter. Without a word, he unclasped the iron rank badge from his cloak. He looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the wood. Mira looked up. "Are you sure?" He smiled. "I've been sure for years." She laughed softly. "Your wife finally convinced you?" "My wife convinced me 10 years ago." He looked toward Tarin. "It just took me this long to find someone worth replacing me." Tarin stared. "I didn't replace you." "No." Garrick smiled. "You became something different." Mira reached beneath the counter. She withdrew a freshly polished badge. Iron rank. Its dark metal caught the light from the fireplace. She stepped around the counter. For just a moment, Tarin's hand drifted to the pouch beneath his cloak. Bram's copper badge rested inside. He closed his eyes. "We're finally adventurers." Slowly, he pinned the iron insignia to his cloak. Mira smiled. "Congratulations, Iron Rank." The guild erupted into applause. Maeve folded her arms. "So," Tarin looked at her. "What? You planning on getting me nearly killed every mission?" He stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since Bramholt died, he laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it was real. Garrick smiled. "There he is." He picked up his old shield, adjusted the travel pack on his shoulder, then headed for the guild doors. He never looked back. He didn't need to. Outside, the last light of the setting sun stretched across the road leading west. Inside, an Iron Rank adventurer stood among the crowd, not because he had become fearless, but because when others needed him most, he had chosen to lead anyway. The road to Diamond had only just begun.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see Tarin's journey continue, all the way to Diamond Rank, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. I read as many comments as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, or even ideas for future adventures. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and lets me keep making stories like this. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of Road to Diamond.